everyone, this is Mrs. Strack here again. I'm here to read you your weekly story with Bailey. And he might start barking, but don't worry about that. The skill we're working on this week is fact and opinions. Now, facts are things we can prove, like the sky is blue. I can go outside and see if that's true or not. Or this book is called The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. I can look to see if that's true. Opinions are things that we think or cannot prove. For example, my favorite subject is reading. Now, I'm sure Mrs. Rinky or Miss Brister would say their favorite subject is math. Or you might think your favorite subject, probably art or gym. Opinions are things we cannot prove. It's something that you think. So I'm going to read you The Dog That Dug for Dinosaur, and we're going to talk about some facts and opinions while we're reading this book. A long, long time ago, there was a little dog named Trey. He was black and white all over. He had the friendly brown eyes and a very wiggly tail. Trey lived in England. Trey was a real dog, and this is an honestly true story about him. Now, a couple of facts or things we can prove on this page is Trey lived in England. I can prove that. I can see if that's true or not. I can see if he was black and white all over. Now, an opinion there would be he had friendly brown eyes. I may not think his eyes are very friendly, but I do think so. Trey loved two things most in the whole world. First, he loved Annie. She was 12 years old and lived with her family in a small cottage near the beach in Lyme Regis. Secondly, Trey loved going with Mary Ann to dig for fossils. So what are fossils anyway? They are the remains of animals and plants that died a long time ago. When a leaf or bone gets pressed between layers of sea mud, it leaves an imprint. After many, many years, the mud hardens to rock. Now, I can prove all of that. I can prove that's how you make a fossil. Trey and Mary Ann knew that they would find the very best fossils high up on the cliffs around the beach. They climbed up there every day. Trey sniffed the rocks. Sniff, sniff. He pawed the dirt. Scratch, scratch. Mary Ann used a small hammer and a chisel. Tap, tap, tap. Now, they think the very best fossils are at the top of the cliff. And by the end of this story, you may have that opinion too, but I may think something different. So that's an opinion. With these tools, Mary Ann carefully cut fossils out of the cliff, just as her father had shown her. Trey watched as she placed the fossils in her basket. Most of them looked like seashells. Mary Ann and Trey sold them as souvenirs to the tourists that came by stagecoach to swim at the beach near their home. Now, another opinion there would be they think they look like seashells. Not everyone may think they look like seashells, but I can prove that they sold them to the people that came by in stagecoach, so that would be a fact. One day, Trey and Mary Ann discovered some very large bones sticking out of the rocks. They were huge. Trey growled and tried to dig the bones out. Mary Ann used her hands to brush away the loose dirt. "Trey, we've discovered a monster," she declared. Get down. The bones were much too big for Trey and Mary Ann to remove by themselves. "I'll go for help," Mary Ann said. "You stay here, Trey." Trey barked loudly and sat down in the front of the bones. He was a very good guard dog. Now, I can prove that Trey sat in front of the bones. I can see if there's a picture there proving that, so that would be a fact. But he was a very good guard dog. Some people may not agree, so that would be an opinion. Mary Ann ran all the way back to town and asked some grown-ups to help her. "Trey and I have found something really special in the cliff," she told them. "Just wait and see." When the men saw the giant rib bones in the side of the cliff, they were amazed. "What a beast!" they cried. "Look at those sharp teeth." "Is it a crocodile?" one man asked. "Or a stubby whale?" "We don't know what it is," Mary Ann admitted. "But we know it's something special, don't we, Trey?" Trey yipped and wagged his tail. A rich man who lived nearby heard about the sea monster. He hurried to see it for himself. "I'll buy it," he cried. "I will give it to the British Museum in London." "Do you know what it is?" Mary Ann asked. "It is called an ichthyosaurus," the man told her. And there we have ichthyosaur, I'm sorry. We have a pronunciation there. "That means fish lizard," he explained. "It's like a dinosaur with fins." The amazing news spread about the gigantic fish lizard and the dog and the little girl who found it. So many strangers came to Lyme Regis, where Mary Ann and Trey lived. They all wanted to hunt for fossils, too. The men wore tall top hats. The women wore frilly bonnets. They carried pretty little umbrellas called parasols. I have a lot of opinions on that page. The tall hats would be an opinion. I may not think their hats are very tall. The pretty parasols, everyone might not think the parasols were very pretty. Amazing news. Some people might not think the news is pretty amazing, but I also have some facts there. The facts would be that people came to their town. It was in Lyme Regis where they lived. The strangers came. We could prove all of those. Mary Ann shook her head and smiled. She rubbed Trey's soft ears. They watched the strangers together. "They don't have the right tools," Mary Ann whispered. "They are wearing the wrong kinds of shoes. Aren't they silly, Trey?" Trey yipped and chased his tail. Curious scientists visited Lyme Regis too. One man came from the university in Oxford. His name was William Buckland. He went to the old carpenter's shop where Mary Ann and Trey sold their fossils. "Can you show me where you found the ichthyosaur, young lady?" He asked politely. "Do you think you could find the exact spot again?" "Trey can find it," Mary Ann boasted. Together, Mary Ann and Mr. Buckland followed the little dog across the beach and up the cliffs. Trey sniffed the rocks. Sniff, sniff. He pawed the dirt. Scratch, scratch. Suddenly, he yipped. Then he sat down. Mary Ann pointed. It was the exact place where she had discovered the strange fish lizard. "What an intelligent dog," Mr. Buckland declared. Trey wagged his tail. Now, I would agree that Trey is a very intelligent dog for finding the same spot, but that is Mr. Buckland's opinion. Some people may not agree with that, so that would be an opinion on that page. We could prove that he yipped. We could prove that he found the spot, and those would all be facts. Trey and Mary Ann continued to dig for fossils. They were very careful. Mary Ann watched for falling rocks like her dad told her. Trey looked out for storms and high tides. Then, one day, they discovered another giant creature. "Look, Trey," Mary Ann cried. "Is it a sea dragon?" And on these 2 pages, we can see the bones they found. Trey sniffed the skeleton and snapped at it with his teeth. The creature had a long, long neck. Its backbone was like a humped turtle shell. Instead of feet and legs, it had 4 large paddles. But it wasn't a sea dragon. Mr. Buckland called it a plesiosaur. One day, Trey and Mary Ann found a fossil that no one in England had ever found before. This one had huge bony wings like a bat and a long, sharp jaw. Trey growled. It looks like a gigantic flying lizard, Marian declared. The scientists thought so too, and that's why they named it a pterodactyl. We've all heard of those. That means lizard with wings. Over the years, Trey, Mary Ann, and Mr. Buckland became good friends. They showed him where to find the best fossils in Lyme Regis. Mr. Buckland brought books about dinosaurs for Mary Ann. He brought beef bones for Trey. Mary Ann, with Trey on her lap, studied her books every day. When Trey's whiskers turned gray and Mary Ann was all grown up, they still collected fossils and sold them in the old carpenter shop. There were boxes and baskets filled with fossils on the floor and on the shelves. Some of the fossil creatures were so big they couldn't fit through the door. That's another fact I can prove. I can see how big they were and see if they were big enough to get stuck in that door. Sometimes children and tourists stopped in to buy fossils of the ancient sand dollars, or tiny fish, or curly shells. Many scientists came to the shop to buy fossils too. They brought carts and wagons to haul away the really large ones. Once a German king stopped at the shop to buy fossils for his collection, and so did the Duke of Buckingham. Those are all facts. I can prove those people bought those fossils. Trey and Mary Ann Anning became very famous. Now that would be an opinion. I may not think they're famous, but someone else could have a different opinion. Today, if you go to the Natural History Museum in London, you can see large fossils they discovered together. Now that would be a fact. I can go to that museum and find if their fossils are there. You could also see a famous painting of Mary Ann holding her fossil basket and Trey the dog that dug for dinosaurs. And that is The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs, a true story about a little girl and her dog who discovered fossils. Now remember, the skill we're working on this week is fact and opinions. Facts are things we can prove. I can figure out if they're true or not. Opinions are things that we think. If someone can think something differently, then that would be an opinion. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next time.